guys. Tonight we tiptoe through cobblestone alleys and creaky candlelit halls to meet an animal both adored and abhorred, a creature soft as velvet, sly as gossip, and somehow once considered a minion of Satan himself. Yes, you're about to enter a world where cats aren't cuddly lap companions, but shadowy omens of doom. Their golden eyes flicker in torchlight, and every tail twitch might just mean someone's cursed by morning. You'll walk through villages where meows make people clutch their rosaries, and where a purring cat on your doorstep is more likely to earn you a fiery trial than a warm bowl of milk. And just a heads up, you probably won't survive this era with your sanity or your cat intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge carefully into a muddy English village sometime around the year 1300. The sun has already dipped below the treetops, and the scent of turnip stew mingles with chimney smoke. You wrap your cloak tighter. It's damp out, and the sky feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. You don't notice the pair of glowing eyes watching from beneath a crooked cart. A cat. She's black as the soot, clinging to the thatched rooftops, silent as snowfall, and staring straight at you like she knows something you don't. The villagers do notice, though. You hear it in the shift of their voices, the way one old woman hisses through her teeth and mutters a half prayer. Someone makes a sign of the cross. Another grabs a clump of mugwort from his belt and rubs it between his fingers, eyes darting nervously toward the alley. You're baffled. It's a cat. Soft, sleek, low to the ground, with ears like delicate little sails. She doesn't look evil, more like she's looking for food or a warm place to curl up. But in this time, in this place, your casual indifference could get you accused of harboring dark forces. You follow the cat's path as she slips behind a tavern, disappearing like a breath into the night. A boy whispers, "She belongs to Maud." Someone else groans. You don't know Maud, but the way they say her name makes it clear. She's trouble. The Middle Ages were soaked in fear of disease, of heresy, of witches, and somehow of whiskers. People needed explanations for bad crops, miscarriages, or sudden storms. And in the absence of meteorology or modern medicine, they leaned on whatever made the world feel less chaotic. Unfortunately for the neighborhood cats, their nighttime habits, independent spirits, and wide, unblinking eyes made them an easy scapegoat. You slip into the tavern. The air is warm, thick with the tang of ale and the chatter of villagers swapping tales. Someone's carving a wooden spoon, another's sharpening a blade. Then someone says it. That beast's been seen at the gallows again. Apparently the black cat has taken to lingering near the execution site, winding between the legs of the condemned, curling up beside the gibbet. People start calling her a soul thief, a death licker, a whisperer to the dead. It doesn't help that she's been seen following Maud, the midwife with too much knowledge and too few friends. You sip your drink and pretend not to listen as the stories swirl. The cat was spotted during last winter's blizzard. Next day, half the sheep died. She crossed someone's path before a well collapsed. Her shadow touched a baby's cradle, and the baby cried all night. She's been seen in 2 places at once. She speaks in dreams. She's been here for 50 years, maybe more. You glance around. Not one of these people would say they believe in magic, but they believe in signs, in patterns, in old warnings, passed down like soup recipes. Historians still argue whether these widespread fears of cats were driven more by religious doctrine or by folkloric tradition. It's likely a blend. After all, Christianity had to adapt to local customs, and many pre-Christian beliefs were full of animal spirits, shape-shifting gods, and moonlit omens. Cats were caught in that tangle, sometimes revered, sometimes reviled, but always watched. You leave the tavern and walk down the dirt road. There she is again, the black cat, perched on a stone wall, tail curled like a question mark. She stares straight into you. You feel oddly unsettled. Not scared exactly, but as if you've stepped into a story older than the village itself. Then someone throws a stone. It misses, but the cat bolts, streaking into the woods like smoke. You think about what you just witnessed. Grown adults blaming misfortune on a creature that fits in a breadbasket. But when you consider the fragility of their world, the way one bad winter could mean starvation, or one whisper could lead to a witch trial, maybe it made sense to find a symbol, something visible, something they could point at. You tuck your hands into your sleeves. The stars are coming out. Owls hoot overhead, and somewhere a dog barks at shadows. And in that moment, you realize, in the Middle Ages, surviving the night wasn't just about warmth and food. It was also about not being the one who looked too long into a cat's eyes. You wake to the gentle drip of rain tapping on your hood, curled under a cart near the market square. Someone's already set up a stall of root vegetables, and a woman sloshes past you with 2 buckets hanging from a wooden yoke across her shoulders. The cobblestones glisten, and the morning smells like wet wool and fresh bread. But something else tickles your nose too. Burnt herbs and the faintest scent of animal musk. You stretch and wander toward the edge of the square, where a group has gathered around a weathered-looking man telling a story. You sidle in, listening just in time to catch the words bastet and temple cat. He's talking about Egypt. You're no scholar, but even you know ancient Egyptians loved their cats. They didn't just tolerate them, they worshipped them. Images of sleek felines graced tomb walls, and mummified cats were laid lovingly beside pharaohs. The goddess Bastet, with her cat-shaped head and ever-serene expression, guarded homes and mothers, protecting the weak and swatting away evil like it was a slow-moving rat. But here in the muddy heart of medieval Europe, that reverence has long since soured. The rain keeps falling, but the old man keeps talking, weaving a thread from the Nile all the way to Rome, where cats lounged in villas and stalked city rats beneath aqueducts. The Romans saw them as lucky, even virtuous, symbols of freedom, guardians of the home. But freedom was not exactly a prized trait in a world where obedience, both religious and social, meant survival. You lean against a post and think, so what happened? Historians still argue whether the decline in the cat's image happened fast or slow. Was it a clean cut after Christianity took hold, or a gradual unraveling of pagan ties? Either way, the shift was dramatic. The animal once linked to protection and fertility now becomes an object of mistrust, especially as the church begins labeling everything pre-Christian as suspect at best and heretical at worst. Cats, with their eerie calm and untamable nature, quickly became suspicious. They didn't work like oxen. They didn't guard like dogs. They hunted alone, slept all day, wandered by night. And heaven help you if one sat near a cradle and the baby died the next morning. People talked. You duck into the side door of a half-timbered house and find yourself in a cramped kitchen. The woman inside barely notices you. She's muttering to herself, grinding something with a mortar and pestle. On the windowsill, a tabby cat sits curled, tail twitching lazily. The woman feeds it a scrap of bacon fat. She notices your stare and says, "He keeps the mice from the flour, that's all." But she won't look you in the eye, as if the very presence of the cat needs defending. Back in Roman times, a cat like that would have been a household asset, proudly shown to guests. In some places, a cat was even considered a dowry gift. But by your current century, owning a cat, especially if you were a woman, or worse, a widow, could mark you as odd, suspicious, maybe even dangerous. There's a story the old man in the square told that sticks in your head. A Roman general once swore by his cat's instincts, claiming it could sense deceit. But try saying that in 13th century France, and people might think you've made a pact with demons. Times change fast when fear is involved. You wander past a crumbling chapel and notice a carving along its arch. Lions, oddly stylized. Maybe once those lions were meant to represent strength, courage, but now they look more like warnings. They have wide eyes and curling tongues, like they're laughing at you. A friar sweeps the steps. You ask him if the chapel ever had images of cats. He frowns and shakes his head. "Too clever by half," he says. "God made beasts to serve. Cats serve only themselves." And that's the crux of it, isn't it? Cats don't obey. In a medieval world obsessed with order, obedience, and hierarchy, cats are anomalies. They don't fetch. They don't kneel. They don't protect sheep or pull carts or bark at intruders. They stroll into your house like they own the place, knock over your jug of milk, and then stare at you like it was your fault. Even today, let's be honest, they're not team players. But back then, this attitude didn't just seem rude. It seemed sinister. You sit on a low stone wall beside the chapel, watching a ginger tomcat roll in the wet grass. He looks utterly unbothered by the world's opinion of him. Maybe that's part of the magic, or the threat. Cats don't need you to like them. They don't even need you to believe in them. They just are. And in a world trying to make sense of plagues and famines and falling stars, that kind of indifference, it rattled people. There's a fringe belief you overhear in the village bakery later, half whispered between kneading and stoking the oven. Some folks say cats remember the gods, that when they stare into firelight or watch the moon, they're communing with something older than the church. It's the kind of story people don't write down, but pass around like smuggled sweets. You step outside again. The rain has slowed. And as you walk past shuttered homes and flickering lanterns, you realize that this deep distrust of cats didn't come from one place. It came from many. From the loss of older beliefs, from the rise of rigid doctrines, and from a universal human urge to find meaning, especially when bad things happen. The cat you saw this morning watches from a rooftop now. Her tail flicks once, twice, like a metronome counting down to something unseen. And then she vanishes behind the chimney. The village bell tolls twice, low, echoing clangs that rattle across the thatched rooftops and dissolve into mist. You follow the sound down a mossy path toward the chapel. its squat stone frame hunched like a tired monk. Inside, the air is thick with incense, beeswax, and that old, chilly damp that never quite dries from the stone. Rows of wooden pews stand neatly in place, and carved saints peer down with eyes worn smooth from centuries of worry. And somewhere near the altar, a hiss. You pause. It's faint, almost masked by the priest's muttering Latin, but you hear it again. A cat, trapped or hiding, its presence unmistakable in this holy space. A boy beside you grabs your arm and whispers, "It's bad luck. If it crosses the altar, we'll have storms." You stare at him, wondering how a whiskered creature could wield the weather. But here, where miracles and misfortunes are separated by little more than a candle's flicker, people believe it. Or at least they act like they do. And really, what's the difference? You slip toward a side alcove where the statue of Saint Michael looms with wings of stone and a blade poised mid-strike. At the base of the statue, a small, soot-colored cat stares up, blinking slowly as if unimpressed by divine warfare. You crouch and offer your hand. She sniffs it, then turns her back. You chuckle under your breath, but a nearby friar doesn't find it funny. He rushes over, robes swishing like angry curtains. "Out!" he hisses, not to the cat, but to you. That thing doesn't belong here. It listens when it shouldn't. Watches too long. The friar's eyes are sunken, rimmed with suspicion. You want to ask what the cat might have heard? What terrible sermon could possibly be spoiled by feline ears? But you don't, because the fear in his voice isn't theatrical, it's real. And that fear has roots. As you leave the chapel, you recall what you've heard whispered over firewood and boiled cabbage, that during sermons, cats would sometimes yowl, hiss, or pace through the pews. People started believing they were mocking the holy words, or worse, resisting them. Some claimed cats flinched at the sound of prayers. Others insisted they saw cats flee from the ringing of bells. Historians still argue whether this belief stemmed from isolated superstitions or coordinated church messaging. But by the 12th century, cats were increasingly framed as not just odd or aloof, but spiritually suspicious. You pass a boy drawing in the mud with a stick. He's tracing a cat with a pitchfork tail and horns. "Father said they're spies for the devil," he says with complete conviction, then scampers off before you can ask what Satan could possibly need with a fleet of fluffy scouts. The church's stance wasn't always consistent, but once whispers take hold, consistency isn't required. One bishop's warning becomes another town's doctrine, and before long, the mere presence of a cat near anything sacred is seen as a threat. You wander into a tavern again. Different one this time, more quiet and smokier. A traveling monk sits near the fire, half drunk on mulled wine, spinning a tale that makes the hairs on your arms rise. "They say," he mutters, "that cats steal the breath of dying men, that they curl on your chest to weigh down your soul as it tries to leave, that they listen to confessions and carry them elsewhere." You glance at the hearth. Sure enough, a marmalade cat dozes there, tail twitching gently. The monk sees it and grimaces. "I've seen one sit through an entire mass without blinking," he says. "Tell me that's not unnatural." You might laugh, but you know better now. In this world, anything that acts outside the pattern draws suspicion, And cats? They never followed patterns. One moment they're affectionate. The next, they disappear for days. They don't bark when you enter, they silently watch. They choose who they tolerate. And that choice feels personal. There's a story going around about a woman whose cat followed her to confession. The priest refused to continue until it left, said he could feel it judging. Another tale claims a nobleman's cat bit through his rosary while he slept, and he died within the month. Whether these tales are warnings or coincidences doesn't matter. The more people talk, the more true it becomes. You head out once more. The road dark now, lit only by flickering lanterns and the occasional torch wedged into a gatepost. The night feels heavier than usual. You think of the friar's eyes, the boy's muddy drawing, the monk's twitching mustache as he stared at the cat, and suddenly you notice it. No one owns their cats anymore. Not out loud. They're just strays. They come and go. They're not mine, as if claiming one would invite suspicion, or worse, a visit from the village elders. You hear a cry down an alley and see a group of children throwing stones at a cat trapped in a barrel. The poor thing howls, its eyes wild, tail fluffed like a feather duster. One girl yells, "Witch's beast!" Another shouts, "It's got the devil in it!" You shout to stop them, but the kids scatter, squealing with laughter. The cat darts out and vanishes into the dark. You sit for a moment on a damp wooden crate, stunned by how deep the fear runs, how early it starts. Even children know. Cats aren't safe. Not to befriend, not to protect, not even to pity. You remember the hissing sound in the chapel, the friar's panic, the tales of breath stealing, and deep inside, a gnawing realization takes hold. The Middle Ages didn't just misunderstand cats, they misunderstood mystery. And cats, bless their prickly hearts, are nothing but mystery wrapped in fur. Your feet crunch through brittle leaves as you follow a winding path past the village and into the nearby woods. Here the fog hangs lower, like a curious spirit peeking between branches. The air smells of moss and mushrooms, and every twig snap echoes like a warning. You're on your way to visit someone they told you not to visit, which of course is exactly why you're going. Her name is Maud. You've heard it whispered in taverns, muttered at the market, and hissed during sermons. Maud the midwife, Maud the healer, Maud who lives alone, too deep in the woods, with too many herbs, and, of course, too many cats. You find her cottage tucked between two yew trees, the thatch roof drooping like a tired brow. A faint curl of smoke trickles from the crooked chimney. You hesitate at the door. A small white cat watches you from the windowsill, eyes the color of river stones. You knock. The door creaks open on its own. Inside, it's dark but not unfriendly. The smell of rosemary and damp earth fills your nose. Bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling. Jars line the shelves, filled with things that definitely wiggle, shimmer, or crunch. And near the hearth, nestled on a worn wool blanket, lie 4 cats. Black, gray, orange, and that same white one who somehow beat you inside. Maud turns. She's older than you expected, her face folded like parchment left in the rain. Her eyes are bright, sharp. "You're late," she says. No smile, not unfriendly, but not wasting time either. You tell her you're just visiting. curious, wanting to understand why people are so afraid. She snorts. They're afraid of anything that listens and doesn't kneel, especially if it has claws. She hands you a cup of something steaming. It smells vaguely of thyme and, oddly, raisins. And as you sip, she begins to talk. They've always feared women like me, she says. And the cats? They come to us, not the other way round. You learn that midwives were among the most common owners of cats during this period. Makes sense, really. A woman helping deliver babies, tending the sick, steeping strange brews by candlelight. Who better to attract a cat, that connoisseur of comfort and quiet chaos? But that connection was dangerous. Too many cats around a woman like Maud, and suddenly the villagers start using words like witch. Not always out loud. At first, it's just the long stares, the dropped silence when she enters a room. Then the rumors begin. Her cat stared at my baby, someone says. Now he won't stop crying. I saw one of her beasts dragging a bone, too big for a mouse, says another. And just like that, the cats become accomplices, familiars, demon pets, proof. Historians still argue whether familiar was always a negative term. In some early folk traditions, a familiar was more of a helper, an animal spirit that guided a wise person, not a wicked one. But the church didn't see it that way. Familiar meant familiar with evil, and therefore suspect. You glance down at the white cat, who has leapt silently into your lap. She purrs like a soft drum roll, unbothered by centuries of slander. Maud watches you. You know, she says softly, they say cats carry souls. You raise an eyebrow. Old belief? She shrugs. When a woman dies, her cat might carry her soul a while. Keep it safe. See it through. It's not evil, just strange. And they don't like strange. You finish your drink and thank her, but she waves you off. Watch your back on the way home. Not everyone who walks in those woods walks out the same. As you step back outside, twilight is already sinking its teeth into the horizon. The path looks different somehow, more twisted. Behind you, a chorus of meows rises like a spell. You don't look back. Halfway down the trail, you spot a dead bird laid gently in the middle of the path. A gift? A warning? Hard to say. Either way, it's very cat-like. In the village, a new story has started to brew. They say Maud's cats light candles at night, that they speak in whispers too low for the human ear, that one of them has never blinked, not once. You listen as two women tell these tales over their wash buckets, lips pursed, eyes darting toward the woods. You don't correct them, not because you believe them, but because belief is rarely the point. Fear spreads easier when it's dressed in a good story. There's another tale, too. Quieter, harder to trace. It says witches don't just own cats, they become them. A woman caught in cat form is said to walk on hind legs when no one's looking. She knows things she shouldn't. She returns with blood on her paws, and no one ever sees the rat. One man even swears he struck a black cat with his boot, only to find Maud limping the next day. Coincidence? He doesn't think so. He won't go near her garden anymore. You sit on a low wall and watch as a scrawny kitten steals a fish head from a market cart. No one sees it, or pretends not to. It scampers into the alley, tail high, utterly pleased with itself. Witches, cats, women who live too far from town, they've all blurred together now. Suspicion doesn't care about accuracy. It thrives on repetition. And Maud, she keeps to her herbs and her hearth. But you wonder, what's it like to fall asleep every night beside a creature the whole world sees as wicked? The rain comes harder the next morning, soaking the straw rooftops and pooling in the wheel ruts that vein the village paths. You find shelter under the overhang of the scribe's hut, watching as the drops patter onto a cat perched nearby, utterly unfazed. Its fur lies slick and shiny, water dripping from its ears, but it does not flinch. It simply stares. A man walks by clutching a parchment scroll, and as he passes, he mutters, "It's a sign." Again, you follow him, your curiosity piqued, and end up at the village square, where a handful of villagers gather around a trembling old man reading from a letter with trembling hands and a cracked voice. The parchment bears the wax seal of the Pope. People listen, jaws clenched, brows furrowed, even as chickens squawk underfoot and pigs root at the edge of the cobblestones. The letter is short, but its echo will last for centuries. It's from Pope Gregory IX, dated around 1233, and in it cats, especially black ones, are linked to heresy. Not directly, mind you. But his letter, Vox in Rama, describes rituals of devil worship allegedly practiced in secret. And what animal appears at the heart of this supposed satanic cult? A black cat? Revered, kissed, adored, and more disturbingly, accused of being the devil in disguise. You lean against a post, absorbing the implications. This isn't just mutterings from suspicious villagers anymore. This is official, papal, divine decree, or at least the closest thing medieval Europe gets to one. Historians still argue whether Gregory truly meant to condemn cats outright, or whether the accusations were more symbolic. But as the villagers murmur and cross themselves, it's clear they heard one message: cats are evil. From the very top, you glance across the square and see a ginger tomcat slink under a cart. No one throws stones this time. They just watch, coldly, waiting for it to vanish on its own. You follow the whispers over the next few days. People start repeating Gregory's words secondhand, sometimes adding details that weren't in the original letter. They say black cats drink blood at Sabbaths, that they walk backward when no one's looking, that they speak in riddles. The line between canon and folklore vanishes like footprints in mud. You overhear a priest tell a traveler, "The devil takes the form of many things, but he prefers a vessel that walks softly and sees in the dark." The traveler laughs uneasily. Like a cat? The priest doesn't laugh. You find yourself in a nearby town a few days later, drawn by rumors of a procession, part penance, part public warning. At the center of the square stands a tall stake, and around it, bundles of straw and logs. You've seen this before. You know what comes next. But what's tied to the post is not a person. It's a cage. And inside, hissing, scratching, panicked, are 3 cats. One white, one orange, one deep, smoky black. A boy nearby tells you in a whisper, "They belong to a woman accused of whispering into the wind." No one seems to question how wind whispering requires cats. No one really needs to. It's all part of the same stew now. Women, whispers, herbs, cats, storms, milk curdled at the wrong hour. The torch is lit. You can't stop it, and the smell of burning fur and fear will follow you through every corner of this journey. That night, the village feels quieter. Not safe, never safe, but subdued, a little less alive. You hear no purring, no soft footfalls on wooden beams. The barns echo with a new stillness, a lack of movement that feels somehow wrong. A merchant you bunk with tells you he used to keep cats in his grain store. Good workers they were, he says. Now I've got to settle for traps and prayers. He shrugs, but safer this way. You never know what else they carry. The papal letter has done its work. Not all at once, not in every place, but like ink in water, the suspicion spreads. Some towns begin setting bounties on black cats. Others quietly follow suit with no decree needed. The link has been made. Cats are no longer pest control. They're a pest themselves. And those who keep them, they're something worse. You return to the village square the next morning to find a rough sign tacked to the well. Scrawled in charcoal, it reads, "No cats, no witches, no moonwalkers." You're not entirely sure what a moonwalker is, but you suspect it has little to do with dancing and everything to do with walking alone at night. Maybe with a cat, maybe like you. As you pass the alley behind the tavern, you see a scrap of fur, a little black paw sticking from behind a barrel. Still, unmoving. You don't check, you don't need to. The damage has been done. Not just to the cats, but to how people see them. A soft creature that once purred beside cradles and slept in monastery windows is now a suspected spy for the devil. And the fire hasn't gone out yet. You wake before dawn, jolted upright by the echo of a scream. Sharp, human, then suddenly muffled. A silence settles afterward, thick and wrong. You pull on your cloak and follow the dim flicker of torchlight toward the commotion. In the village square, a figure is being dragged through the mud. A woman. Her gray hair is tangled with straw, her hands tied behind her back. Two men lead her, one with a rusted sword, the other with a cudgel. She's barefoot, her feet streaked with frost. A crowd forms. No one speaks. You don't dare ask why, but it becomes obvious when someone kicks aside a wicker basket, and from beneath it a cat scurries out, yowling, its eyes wide and terrified. She owned a cat, and that's reason enough. The woman is dragged to the chapel steps, and a crude tribunal begins. They ask her if she speaks to spirits, if she walks alone by moonlight, if her cat ever sat on her shoulder. She answers softly. "I'm a healer," she says. "He just likes to sleep near me." That's enough to seal her fate. A boy offers a basket of stones. One by one, they pelt her cat. It screeches, tries to flee, but someone throws a net. The cat is trussed like fish on a market day and tied beside the woman. You can't watch the rest. You find a place to sit in the old stable, head spinning. It isn't justice. It's panic, dressed up in scripture and fear. A communal purging, as much about ridding themselves of helplessness as it is about ridding themselves of supposed evil. The idea of cat trials might sound absurd to modern ears, but in the Middle Ages it wasn't unheard of. Animals, pigs, goats, roosters, and yes, cats, were occasionally tried in courtrooms, given lawyers, sentenced to punishment. It was a way of projecting order onto a chaotic world. If you could accuse a cat, punish a cat, you could say, "Look, we're not helpless. We're in control." Historians still argue whether these trials were sincere or symbolic, part legal ritual, part public spectacle. But they happened, and they were taken seriously. You hear from a merchant that in parts of France, cats were swung from bell towers in sacks, killed in the name of purifying the air. In Belgium, cats were thrown from towers to ward off evil. In Germany, festivals involved burning them in bonfires. The justifications varied, but the cruelty didn't. You wander out to the woods again, hoping the trees will feel less suffocating. You spot a black cat watching you from a branch, so still it might be carved from onyx. It doesn't run when you approach, just blinks. Once, slowly. You wonder if it knows what its kind have endured, if it remembers. Back in the village, someone's painting symbols on doorways, protective charms, they say. One of them shows a cat's face, crossed out with 2 black lines. Another shows a woman and a cat both engulfed in flames. No one paints over them. No one questions their presence. In the tavern, a man tells you that his cousin was cursed by a cat. Looked it in the eye too long, he says, dunking bread in stew. Lost all his teeth by winter. You don't ask for proof. In this time, a strange illness or a stroke of bad luck is explanation enough. People connect the dots how they like, and yet you also start hearing stories whispered in corners, tales of cats surviving fires, of a cat who walked across hot coals and came out without so much as a singed whisker, of cats seen at gallows before the condemned were hanged. And after, you begin to understand why they scare people. They always come back. You pass a barn where a cluster of cats, half-starved but alive, huddle near a warm manure pile. You count 9 of them. The classic number. The mythic number. 9 lives. No matter how many times they're chased, blamed, or burned, they return. A woman near the well tells you she once buried a cat after it died giving birth. The next morning, it was sitting on her porch. A man says he drowned one, only to see the same cat following him to work 3 days later. Another claims they saw a cat leap into a fire and disappear. Not scream, not burn, just vanish. You don't know what's real, but you're starting to realize the line between fear and awe is whisper thin. And when a creature walks that line so confidently, so casually, it unsettles people. You hear a friar preach the next morning about the devil's tricks. He walks not on cloven hooves, but on silent paws, he warns. He purrs, he watches, he waits. A cat brushes past your ankle as he speaks. You pretend not to notice. The church bells ring out at midnight. You're not sure why. There's no feast day, no procession, no wedding. Yet the sound carries through the damp thatch of your roof and presses against your bones like something alive. You slip on your cloak, slide open the creaky wooden door, and follow the sound through the silver-touched streets. The village looks different at night. Stranger, narrower, as though the houses lean in closer together to whisper secrets they'd never dare share by day. You're not alone. Others walk too, some barefoot, most silent, all moving in the same direction, toward the chapel. No one speaks. The chapel doors are open. Inside, the candles are already lit, and a priest stands at the altar, face drawn and eyes red. This isn't a sermon. It feels more like an exorcism. At the back of the chapel, tied by a string to a splintered wooden post, sits a cat. Black, of course. It paces in tight, frantic circles, hissing when someone comes too close. Its ears lie flat against its skull, and its eyes catch the candlelight like twin sparks of green flame. The priest raises his arms. This creature, he intones, has been seen at all 3 recent deaths. It has howled at the gallows. It has circled the homes of the afflicted. It has drunk milk left for saints. You blink. What does that even mean? But no one questions it, not here, not now. The fear is too thick. The need to blame is too strong. The priest begins chanting, Latin but warped, like a tune hummed backward. The crowd joins him, their voices rising like smoke. Some hold crosses, others clutch salt. A few carry cats of their own, though none admit it. You spot one woman with a tabby kitten in her arms, wrapped in a shawl. She rocks it like a baby, her eyes blank. Another man carries a cage with 2 cats, both trembling. You begin to understand. This isn't a trial. It's a ritual. Historians still argue whether these black mass rumors were rooted in real gatherings or fabricated by fearful clergy and imaginative villagers. Some think they were symbolic. Others believe they were a mix, half imagined, half exaggerated. But the stories persisted. Gatherings at night, inverted hymns, candles made from human fat, and cats, always cats, singing in strange tongues or serving as the devil's orchestra. Tonight you're watching one of those stories come alive. The priest sprinkles water over the cat and it hisses, ears pinned. The crowd gasps. A child screams. Someone mutters, "It burns her." Another yells, "The devil hates holy water." The priest raises a cross. The cat screeches. You feel a chill deeper than the cold. Not from belief, but from what belief can do when mixed with fear. A woman near you whispers, "They say cats gather at crossroads to speak to the dead." Another adds, "They dance in graveyards when the moon is full." "Mine stared at me last night," a man mumbles, like it knew. You slip outside, needing air. The sky is full of stars, but they feel too sharp, like watching eyes rather than distant suns. Somewhere to the east, a dog barks, then yelps, then goes silent. You walk away from the chapel, away from the crowd, into the fields beyond the village. The frost crackles under your boots, and the grass glitters like glass. And then you hear it, a meow, soft, sad. You turn. A black cat sits in the center of the road, tail curled, head tilted. She blinks at you. Once, twice. You kneel, and she approaches slowly, paw by cautious paw. She presses her forehead against your knee, and something breaks in your chest. This is no devil. This is a creature who wants warmth. You carry her back to the edge of the village, but stop before the chapel comes into view. You don't want her to see what's happening inside, or maybe you don't want yourself to see it again. You take her to Maud's cottage. The old woman opens the door without surprise. "Another one?" she asks. "Come in then. We've room." The hearth crackles inside. More cats lie curled on shelves and cushions. It smells of rosemary and rain. You stay a while, rocking quietly in an old chair as the cat curls on your lap. Maud hums a lullaby too old to have words. You realize sitting there that cats are not symbols. They are survivors. They've been through fire and fear, exorcism and execution, and still they purr, still they blink in that slow, wise way, as if they've seen everything and still choose to forgive. And maybe that's what truly unsettled people. Cats do not beg. They do not kneel. They endure. And sometimes they sing. You wake in Maud's cottage to the gentle push of a paw on your cheek. The black cat from the road sits on your chest like a miniature sphinx, eyes half-lidded and purring with the weight of deep sleep and deeper secrets. You blink in the dim morning light, still caught between dream and waking. Maud is already stirring herbs in a pot. She likes you, she says. That's rare. You scratch behind the cat's ear and she leans in, giving a long, satisfied blink. You smile, but your mind drifts back to the chapel, the chanting, the cage, the desperation to control what can't be understood. You ask Maud if the stories are true, about witches turning into cats, about riding them through the air on Sabbaths. She grins as she hands you a bowl of porridge. Depends who you ask. Turns out, shape-shifting was one of the juiciest ingredients in the witch-hunting stew. Across Europe, particularly in the Germanic and Slavic regions, cats were often believed to be not just companions of witches, but the witches themselves. Women accused of witchcraft were sometimes said to vanish and reappear as cats, or to travel great distances as silent shadows beneath the moon. The logic was murky at best. If someone's cat was too smart, too present, or too lucky, it might be their other self. You trip over it and suddenly your neighbor's toothache is your fault. A cat scratches a child and you're called to trial. One story you hear over lunch from a woodsman claims a man cut off a cat's paw during a chase, and the next day found an old woman in town missing a hand. Coincidence? Maybe. But in the Middle Ages, people weren't looking for evidence. They were looking for patterns. And the cat, with its ability to vanish, to climb where others couldn't, to return home after weeks away, it was the perfect vessel for suspicion. You travel on, following a trail of stories. In a misty village nestled near the coast, you hear about flying nuns. Yes, actual nuns, accused of shape-shifting into cats and slipping out of convents under moonlight. How else? One toothless fisherman tells you. Could they be seen on the cliffs at night and back in their beds by dawn? Historians still argue whether these tales reflect genuine folk belief or were invented by authorities eager to frame certain women as transgressors of the natural order. Some say the nuns were simply restless. Others think the stories were crafted by those who resented powerful women having any control over their own movements, or, heaven forbid, their own bodies. You pause at a crossroads under a crooked oak tree. The wind stirs the leaves above, and a cat, striped and sleek, drops from a low branch and lands soundlessly before darting off into the brush. A witch, perhaps, or just a very agile cat? In medieval minds, the line was thin, especially when the cat did something eerie, like stare too long, disappear too quickly, or arrive just as someone died. In a village near the French border, you visit a woman named Isabelle. She's old, half-blind, and sharp as vinegar. She invites you in without a word, sets down 2 bowls of broth, and gestures for you to sit. Cats swarm her house like living cushions, on rafters, under chairs, across her lap. She begins telling stories without you asking. They say I flew to the cathedral once, she croaks, on a white tom with wings made of ash. You raise an eyebrow, and that I turned into smoke, and back again. I never corrected them. It kept the thieves away. You glance at the cats. One of them yawns, revealing teeth like tiny pearls. Did you? You ask quietly. Isabelle winks. I can't even get out of bed some days. But the stories are powerful, especially when people are scared. You understand now. The idea of flying witches, of women transforming into animals, served more than one purpose. It justified control, it allowed persecution, and paradoxically, it gave accused women a kind of twisted fame. Better to be feared than forgotten. You leave Isabet's home and walk through a low fog that smells of salt and heather. A boy calls out, "Beware the shadow cat," and disappears down a lane, giggling. You realize some of these stories have already shifted from belief to legend, from horror to play, but others still hold weight. In a town square, you see a game played by children. One dresses as a witch, another as a cat, and the rest throw pebbles until both run away. The villagers laugh, but beneath the laughter is the memory of real women and real cats who didn't run fast enough. The moon rises early that evening, fat and golden. You lie beneath a hay cart, watching as bats flicker overhead. A cat perches beside you, utterly unbothered by the breeze or the dark, or your questions. It flicks its tail once, then twice, and then it leans in, as if to whisper the answer to something you didn't know you'd asked. You smile. Whatever the truth behind the flying nuns and shifting women, one thing is certain. These creatures have never belonged entirely to this world. Not then, not now. Your boots crunch over brittle twigs as you trek back into a village that feels quieter than before. Not peaceful, just missing something. You notice it first in the barns. No rustle in the rafters, no thump of paws chasing mice across beams. In the alleys, fish guts lie untouched, and the bakery's grain sacks are gnawed straight through. Then it clicks. The cats are gone. Or rather, they've been driven out, not just by fear, but by fire, stone, and rope. You ask around and learn that 2 nights ago, the town elders organized a cleansing. They called it a feast of purity. In reality, it was more like an extermination. Gone are the sleek hunters of the haylofts. Gone are the lazy sun nappers on the mill steps. Gone are the mischief makers on rooftop ridges, eyes glowing like stars, and in their place, rats. You see them bold as brass, skittering across the road in broad daylight. A woman swats at one with a ladle, a boy kicks at another, but there are too many. They know the cats are gone, they know the kingdom's theirs now. And the timing? Uncanny. Because now people are coughing, at first just a little, clearing throats, wiping noses, but it grows fast. Deep, rattling hacks that sound like shovels in wet gravel. You pass a man curled against a church wall, shivering despite the wool on his back. His lips are cracked. His eyes are yellowing. It's the plague, or at least the beginning of it. Of course, no one knows that yet. Not in this village, not now. But it will sweep through the continent like a sickle through wheat. And the irony? Cats could have helped. Historians still argue how much damage might have been avoided if cats hadn't been so aggressively persecuted. After all, it's not cats that carry the plague, it's fleas on rats. And without cats to keep those rats in check, the cities, villages, and alleys become rodent playgrounds. You overhear a traveling merchant say, "Strange, isn't it? Got rid of the cats, and now the sickness comes." Another spits and mutters, "Maybe that's the curse." But the narrative doesn't shift easily. Once a fear has sunk in, it takes more than logic to dig it out. You visit a convent next, hoping for a quieter space, but find chaos instead. Sisters are burning linens, scrubbing floors with vinegar, and all the while rats slip between their skirts like shadows. One nun kneels in prayer, a candle flickering beside her. You spot a tear sliding down her cheek. When you ask what's wrong, she whispers, "My cat is gone. I let her go last week, after what Father said." She shows you a little stone bowl tucked behind her cot. She used to drink from it. That night you sit outside the convent walls and watch the rats swarm a fallen basket of apples. You feel a chill you can't quite name, a sense of something tipping, off balance, broken, and then you hear a sound. Soft, familiar. A purr. A long-haired tabby pads into view, thin but proud. A mouse clenched triumphantly in its jaws. It drops it, purrs again, and sits with its tail curled like a challenge to the rats. You grin, one survivor, maybe more. Over the next few days, you start noticing them, here and there. Cats that escaped the purges, hiding in the woods, under bridges, behind chicken coops. Skittish, yes, but still watching, still waiting. Not gone, just hidden. You return to Maud's cottage and find her garden ravaged. Rat droppings litter the path. A clay jar lies smashed. Inside, her cats sit close together, fur bristled, guarding their food bowls like soldiers. "They know," she mutters. "They always knew." You sit with her in silence, because there's nothing else to say. People wanted to purge evil, and in doing so, they removed one of the few things actually protecting them. It's not a punishment, it's just the price of ignorance. Outside, in the far corner of the garden, a tiny kitten bats at a beetle, oblivious, unbothered, hopeful. Maybe they'll come back. Maybe they always do. 9 lives, and counting. A week passes. You're on the road again, walking through a patchwork of villages, each one draped in the same gray mist and the same muffled coughs. The scent of sage and fear lingers in the air, and wherever you go, stories follow like shadows. One such story catches you in a small town, nestled beside a bog. You arrive just as a cluster of children circle a stump in the square, where a cat made of straw sits perched with button eyes and a tail of twine. They're laughing, chasing each other with painted sticks, singing a rhyme that chills you more than the wind. "Cat on the fire, tail full of sin, burn it quick or the witch gets in." The villagers smile at the scene, clapping along like it's a festival. No one seems to notice the real cat watching from the edge of the square, small, calico, and too thin, hiding behind a barrel, ears twitching. You're not sure what unsettles you more, the rhyme or how casually they sing it. The local tavern keeper explains, "It's tradition, keeps the devil at bay." He gestures to a scorched patch in the square, where each spring they burn a figure, sometimes straw, sometimes wood, sometimes not. You ask if they ever used real animals, he avoids your eyes. As night falls, you hear other stories. Tales of cinder cats with eyes like burning coals, born from witches' ashes. Of cats that walk into homes during storms and curl up by the fire, only to vanish when lightning strikes. One woman swears she saw a cat cough up a human tooth. The line between myth and memory is paper thin. You travel east, where the woods grow thicker and the superstitions stranger. In one village, you visit a cottage covered in painted charms, moons, crosses, bundles of lavender nailed above each window. The woman who lives there lets you in. Her name is Thilda, and she's a collector of tales. She's old, mostly toothless, and sharp as cider. "Sit," she croaks, and points to a stool. A cat slinks around your feet. A regal-looking thing with fur like soot and eyes of molten gold. "I know what they say," she begins. "They say cats drink blood, that they suck baby's breath. that they read your sins from your footprints. You ask if she believes any of that. Course not, she snorts. But I don't trust anyone who never liked a cat. That's always a warning sign. She pours you a cup of something that tastes like boiled rosemary and regret. She tells you about folk tales where cats breathe fire, where they guard treasure beneath abbey stones, where their whiskers point toward buried sins. One tale, particularly odd, claims that cats can smell lies, that if one curls on your lap and then leaves mid-conversation, it means you're hiding something. You joke about putting cats in courtrooms. Tilda nods solemnly and says, "They tried that once in Trier." You're not sure if she's joking. Historians still argue how much these tales reflected belief versus performance. Was it about actually fearing cats? Or about telling a story that made people feel clever, safe, or superior? After all, tales don't need to be true. They just need to be believable. You leave Thilda's cottage with your head full of fire-breathing felines and cats that cry blood beneath moonless skies. But beneath the surface, you hear something else, something quieter, grief. Because buried beneath the jokes and pageants and painted straw is the memory of something darker. The real cats, real women, and real lives, lost to rumor, religion, and fear. On your way out of town, you see another burning figure atop a hill. It's a festival, they say. Just a bit of fun. You stand at the edge and watch. A group of men light the base, laughing, passing around a flask. The flames catch fast. The straw figure, cat-shaped, flares up in seconds, its button eyes turning black. No one notices the real cat watching from the hedgerow, but you do. You meet its eyes. It doesn't run, just blinks. That night, you camp beneath a tree, wrapped in a wool cloak and the hush of wind through bare branches. A small gray cat curls against your hip as you sleep, soft as a secret, and you realize in every village, in every bonfire, every rhyme and warning and wild-eyed tale, the cats remain, sometimes hidden, sometimes feared, sometimes adored, but always still here. The next village you reach looks almost festive. Banners strung between buildings, bread baking in open ovens, children running wild with streamers. You wonder briefly if the worst has passed. Maybe this place is different. Maybe the cats here are safe. Then you see it. In the center of the square stands a tall wooden pole wrapped in garlands of ivy and hawthorn. Beneath it, tied with rope and bright red ribbons, is a sack. It squirms, yowls. You don't need to ask, you already know. This is the Cat King's Day. A man beside you laughs. "Good sport," he says, clapping your shoulder. "We crown the cat, then hang it up till it learns some manners." You stare at him stunned. What does it learn? He blinks. That we're in charge? The sack jerks again. You catch a glimpse of black fur, a flash of teeth. Children scream with delight. The ceremony begins. You want to stop it, but no one else does. You learn quickly. In some parts of medieval Europe, especially in regions like Belgium and northeastern France, cats weren't just feared in private, they were publicly humiliated. Carnival celebrations often included parades mocking clergy, nobles, and cats. Effigies were tossed from towers. Cats were suspended from poles, even sewn into costumes or chased in circles by jeering crowds. To modern minds, it sounds monstrous. But for them, it was catharsis. A way to purge guilt and fear, dressed up as pageantry, Later, in a smoky tavern, you sit beside a man painting crude cats on a game board. The squares are labeled Devil's Ally, Cradle Curse, Familiar, and Thief of Breath. The goal is to chase the cat to the last square, Judgment. Then the player wins. It's just a game, he shrugs. Sure, but every joke comes from somewhere. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincere attempts to drive out evil or simply scapegoat theater. Perhaps both. Fear tends to dance best when it's in costume. You walk the fairgrounds past puppet shows and meat pies, watching as people wear wooden cat masks with long whiskers and painted fangs. One boy holds a squirming kitten in his arms. You breathe a sigh of relief until he tosses it like a beanbag to another child. You lunge, snatch the kitten from midair, and glare. The children scatter. You hold the creature close to your chest. It's shaking, tiny, and completely unaware of the symbolic weight being forced onto its fur. You leave the fairgrounds and find a quiet hill overlooking the village. The kitten purrs as you wrap it in your cloak. Below, the crowd begins their final act, tossing the Cat King from a raised platform into a shallow pool, cheering as it thrashes. Not everyone is cheering. You spot a girl, maybe 12, watching from behind a cart. She clutches a woven doll with a cat's tail sewn on. When she sees you, she offers a shy smile, then vanishes into the crowd. There's hope there. Maybe you travel on, carrying the kitten for a time, until you find a stable with other half-wild barn cats. You release it gently, and it scampers off into the hay. A few towns later, you find a different kind of mockery. In one court hall, a tapestry hangs depicting a noble court in session, except all the humans have cat heads. The judge, the scribes, even the hangman. Their faces are cartoonish, expressions twisted in exaggerated disdain. The message? Clear enough. Cats stand in for human foolishness. Their independence becomes arrogance. Their cunning becomes deceit. Their stillness becomes judgment. It would be funny, if not for the real bodies buried behind the jest. One man tells you of a carnival in Cologne where actors dressed as cats and confessed imaginary sins, stealing butter, seducing priests, eating children's dreams. The audience roared, but someone always ended up with a stone tied to their ankle, just for effect. You sit on a bench at the edge of a parade route and wonder how many of these rituals started as satire and how many ended in smoke. And then a woman sits beside you. "Used to have a cat," she says softly. "Years ago. Black with white feet. Smart as anything. When the bishop came through, I sent her into the woods." You ask if she ever came back. "She did," the woman says, "but I was too scared to feed her. She watched from the trees for a while, then she left for good." She stands. "They remember," she adds, and walks away. That night you dream of a bonfire and cats circling just beyond the light. Silent, watching, not fearful, but waiting. Not for revenge, just for time to pass. They know people forget, but they never forget. The sky darkens earlier now. Autumn stretches its fingers across the land, turning leaves brittle and air thin. You wander into a grander village this time, stone walls, actual streets, chimneys that smoke like they've got something to say. A signpost reads, "Court of High Holiness and Righteous Investigation." You grimace. The longer the title, the more dangerous the place. A man in velvet robes walks past you with a hound on a leash. The hound looks half-starved but noble enough. You ask if he's the magistrate. He laughs. No, I'm a tailor, but I do own a cat. You blink. Isn't that risky? He leans in, lowers his voice. Not these days, not for me. The bishop's wife has two. Persian, I believe. The rules shift, depending who's holding the quill. So the tides are turning, at least for some. You learn quickly that in courts like this, public opinion can be reshaped with a change in leadership or a particularly fashionable noblewoman. Suddenly, cats are acceptable if they're pampered, pedigreed, perfumed. One noble's daughter boasts that her cat drinks goat's milk from a carved horn spoon. But don't get too comfortable, because for the poor, for the old, the odd, or the friendless, the rules remain. You sit in a courtroom gallery and witness a trial, not of a woman, but of her tabby. The accusation? The cat watched a man die without blinking. The evidence? It was seen on the roof the night of a fever death. You nearly laugh, but no one else does. The woman sobs as her cat is taken from her. She's all I have, she says. No one listens. Historians still argue how serious these trials were, whether they were held in true legal standing or used as moral theater. Some were symbolic, others shockingly procedural, with documents, arguments, even defense witnesses. But the outcome was often the same: guilty and punished. And always the cat could not speak for itself. Later that evening, you attend a gathering in a manor house. Soft music, honey cakes, nobles in embroidered gowns, and lounging on a red velvet pillow beside the fireplace, a cat, snow white, one golden eye, one blue. She's a treasure, says the host. Father Dominic blessed her personally. You raise an eyebrow. I thought cats were suspect. The host shrugs. But this one is clean-blooded, from the east. Rare, not like those mongrels the peasants keep. Besides, she doesn't roam. She stays right here. That's the difference, isn't it? Not the cat, but how it behaves, where it lives, who it belongs to. You sneak outside for air. The garden is dim, lit by lanterns hung from fig trees. And there, beneath the hedge, you see eyes, not golden, not blue, just green and old and watching. A dozen feral cats live just beyond the hedges, just outside the gates of this aristocratic calm. You see one missing half its ear, another limping. They smell of soot and soil, and yet they look freer than the velvet one inside. You sit by the garden wall and listen as a nobleman speaks of improved breeding, of cats as decorations, not companions, of them being less feral, more refined. He says, "It's better this way. They're more obedient." You remember what Maud said? Anything that listens but doesn't kneel is dangerous. Well, now they're trying to make them kneel. In a nearby monastery, a friar shows you an illuminated manuscript. Between the saints and serpents, a small cat is painted, curled beneath a scribe's bench. Our mouser, the friar says, kept the ink safe from pests. The monks kept cats, it turns out. Quietly, lovingly, without fear, not because they saw them as divine, but because they saw them as useful, even comforting. Some orders allowed cats in their dormitories, their scriptoriums, even their kitchens. And when a monk's cat died, some scribbled tiny prayers in the margins of their books. One even wrote a eulogy beside Psalm 23. And here, finally, you breathe. Because not all of history forgot their value. Not all fear was louder than truth. Still, as you leave the village, you pass a child teasing a cat with a stick. The cat bats it away and darts into a garden. The child's mother yells, "Stop it! That one's the mayor's. And the child immediately stops. Ownership still dictates safety. The feral cats remain silent, watching, always watching. The sky that morning is streaked with red. Shepherd's warning, the baker mutters as you pass. But you're headed to a place where shepherds don't talk much, and cats don't have to hide. It's a monastery. Humble, walled with uneven stone, half swallowed by ivy, tucked between a bend in the road and a bend in time. You reach the gate and knock, expecting the usual suspicion. Instead, a warm-eyed monk in a faded brown habit opens the door with a smile. "Come in, traveler," he says, "and mind your feet. The cats nap wherever they please." You're not sure if he's joking until you step inside and immediately trip over a sleeping orange tabby sprawled across the threshold. Inside, it's quiet in the best way. Bees hum outside the windows. Soup bubbles somewhere unseen. Quills scratch softly over parchment. And cats. Cats are everywhere. On window ledges, in baskets of laundry, on the thick ledgers in the library. One monk carefully turns a page while a calico sleeps on his sleeve, drooling slightly onto the Latin text. No one seems bothered. You ask the abbot, an old man with spectacles perched on the very tip of his nose, why they keep so many. "They chose us," he says with a shrug, "and they keep the mice out of the grain." But you sense it's more than that. In a chapel alcove, you spot a carved wooden cat tucked among the saints, tiny, no bigger than your hand. "Brother Benedict made that," says a young novice. "Said cats were proof that God liked quiet company." You smile. It's a far cry from the hissing beasts painted in sermons or the straw effigies burned in village squares. Here they're just present, not worshipped, not feared, just accepted. You watch a gray cat curled atop an open Bible, tail twitching gently in sleep. Another is nestled into the crook of a monk's arm as he recites Vespers. It's peaceful in a way that feels almost defiant. Historians still argue whether monastic acceptance of cats was a holdover from Roman practicality or a quiet rebellion against public hysteria. Whatever the reason, monasteries often became safe havens for felines, perhaps because monks, in their stillness, recognized a kindred spirit. One brother tells you, "They know things before you say them. When I'm sad, mine sits beside me. Doesn't fix anything. Just stays." You wonder how different history might have been if more people had adopted that model. Not fixing, not fearing, just staying. Outside in the garden, a tabby is perched on the rim of a well, staring down like she sees something deeper than water. The sun breaks through the clouds, casting long beams over the herbs and drying linens. A monk chuckles and says, "We used to joke she's guarding the souls of the frogs." You laugh too, lightly, sleepily. Later that day, the bells toll for supper, and the cats gather like clockwork, not begging, just being present, like they're part of the liturgy, each one a soft-voiced prayer in motion. You eat a simple meal of bread, lentils, and wild greens, shared with 3 monks and 4 cats. One of them falls asleep on your lap. Another bats at a beetle crawling across the table. No one stops her. When the sun sinks low, the monks light candles. A young novice reads aloud, passages from Proverbs, Psalms, and then, to your surprise, a poem. Not scripture, just words about the warmth of silence and how some creatures know how to listen better than people ever will. You find yourself drifting. Outside, an owl hoots. A black cat sits on the windowsill, silhouetted in gold candlelight, tail curled like a musical note. You feel safer here than anywhere else on this journey. The abbot walks you to the gate when you decide to leave. He carries a fat tabby named Gregory in his arms, like a loaf of bread. Before you go, he says, "We never ask the cats to stay. They do because they want to." You nod. There's a lesson in that. As you walk back down the road, moon rising behind you, you glance back once. Several cats sit along the wall watching, not guarding, not judging, just being, and somehow that's enough. The road turns stony now, winding like a half-remembered tune through rolling hills and brittle grass. It's quieter here. Fewer villages, fewer people, just the rustle of wind and the occasional flutter of birds startled from hedges. You walk with your hood up, the chill biting sharper with each passing day. The cats, too, are fewer. You still catch glimpses, one sunning itself on a flat stone, another slipping behind a fence like a ghost with whiskers. But they're more cautious now, wilder, as if they remember everything. You reach a town that feels like it's waiting for something. The square is empty. The fountain trickles weakly. Signs of the plague linger in shuttered windows and faded red crosses chalked on doors. The silence here isn't peaceful. It's held breath. But oddly enough, there's a cat. She sits in the middle of the square, calm, steady, gray as the stones beneath her. You approach slowly. She doesn't move. A woman leans out from a window and calls, "Careful, that one's seen too much." You pause. She leans farther. "She was here before the sickness. Never left. They say she's a shadow." You ask what that means? Means she's waiting for someone to return. But they won't. You spend the night in the local inn. Bare bones, but dry. Over stale bread and watered-down ale, the innkeeper shares more rumors. Cats walking unburnt from collapsed plague houses. Cats lying across bodies and absorbing illness. One cat, they say, survived 5 owners, each taken by disease, each buried beneath the same willow tree. "Some think they carry death," he whispers. "Others think they carry what's left behind." You hear more fringe theories in the next town. That cats are the devil's librarians, storing sins behind their eyes. That they remember every lie told in their presence. That when they vanish, it's because they've gone to report. Historians still argue about the origins of these beliefs. How much came from fear? How much from the mystery cats never quite shook? But there's no denying it. Even as superstition waned, suspicion clung to cats like burrs on wool. You stop at a traveling bookseller's wagon and flip through a slim volume with a worn leather cover. It's a bestiary, half real, half nonsense. You find lions and bears and dragons, and then, tucked between salamander and sow, a cat. The text reads, "Though it hunts mice and guards grain, beware its eyes, for in them lies a second soul." You buy it. Later that day, you stumble into a tiny chapel with a cracked altar and no priest. Dust motes dance in the weak sunlight, and in the corner a single cat sleeps, curled on a pillow of robes. Someone cared for her once, maybe still does. You sit beside her and pull the bestiary from your pack. You read aloud. She opens one eye, blinks slowly, and goes back to sleep. As evening falls, you pass a crossroads where someone has built a small shrine. 3 stones stacked, a candle burning low. At its base sits a dried bouquet, a prayer carved into bark, and a bowl of milk. Still warm, you glance around. A black cat watches from the brambles. You nod to her. She does not nod back. In a larger town farther north, you finally see signs of change. A woman outside a print shop hands you a flyer. Natural pest control. The case for the common cat. You laugh aloud. She smiles. We've had enough rats for a lifetime. Thank you very much. And just like that, without magic, without theology, without fire or feathers or chance, cats begin to return. You ask her if she ever feared them. Oh, always, she says. Still do a little. Then she winks. But I fear the plague more. It's not love, not yet, but it's something. In the same town, you visit a school where children draw animals in charcoal. You spot 3 cats among the lions and deer. Not devils, not witches, just cats. One of them even smiles. A teacher explains that the old stories are still told, but with a grain of salt now. We're trying to teach them balance, he says. Mystery isn't the same as danger. Outside, a boy crouches near a puddle, coaxing a mangy kitten with bits of bread crust. It comes, cautiously. You head to the edge of town and camp near a hedgerow. The wind rustles the leaves, and a half-dozen cats appear from nowhere, circling your fire just out of reach. Their eyes gleam. Their paws make no sound. One comes closer and curls beside your boot. You share a bit of cheese. It purrs. You whisper, "They're starting to remember." But the truth is, cats never forgot. We just stopped listening. You travel slowly now, letting the landscape unfold at its own pace. Villages come and go. Some still cling to the old fears, muttering about curses and midnight whispers. Others are quieter, calmer, with cats lounging in sunbeams again, half wild, half home, wholly themselves. Your final stop lies on the coast, where the sea groans against jagged rocks and salt crusts the window panes. The town is small, windswept, and smells perpetually of fish, but something about it feels peaceful. You stay in a house owned by an old sailor named Bram. He's mostly deaf, mostly toothless, and entirely unbothered by the world's worries. He has a cat named Harrow, black, missing one ear, and as bossy as a noblewoman at a wedding feast. She showed up during a storm, Bram says, dragged in a half-dead gull and curled up on my boot. I figured she earned her spot. You glance at Harrow. She blinks once in that slow, ancient way. No fear, no apology, just a quiet certainty that the house belongs to her, and Bram is simply renting. One evening, as the waves batter the shore and the wind howls through the chimney, Bram tells you a story. Back when I was a lad, he says, they still feared cats. Said they drew ships to the rocks, called fog, sunk cargo. I once watched a captain throw his cat overboard just because the crew saw her blink before the storm. You frown. Did it help? He shakes his head. Storm came anyway. But we didn't tell the captain that. Later he adds, folk fear what they can't leash, and no one ever leashed a cat? You nod. 'Cause by now, you know that's the heart of it. The cat is freedom made flesh. Soft and sharp. Silent and loud when she wants to be. She doesn't ask for affection, doesn't explain herself, and walks away the moment she's had enough. In a world built on obedience, that's as dangerous as heresy. You visit the local chapel before you leave. It's modest. Just a single bell, a crooked steeple, and a door that sticks in the salt air. But inside, a tabby naps beneath a stained glass window. You squint at the design. It's not a saint. It's a cat. You laugh quietly. Someone gets it. On the road again, you find yourself reflecting. Why did so many people think cats were evil in the Middle Ages? It wasn't just religion, or myth, or the plague. It was fear of the unknown, of the independent, of the mysterious, the things that couldn't be controlled, predicted, or punished. Cats didn't follow rules, they didn't answer to bells, and they didn't break when beaten. They purred through it. And people couldn't stand it. Even now you realize the legacy lingers. Black cats still get side eyes. Halloween decorations still paint them with arched backs and glowing eyes. Superstition might have faded, but the shadow remains. But so do the cats. They returned. They always return. And maybe in the end, that's what makes them so powerful. Not just their mystery, but their endurance, their refusal to vanish, their quiet rebellion. They didn't fight back with claws or curses. They simply stayed. At the edge of a meadow, under a sky blushing with sunset, you stop to rest. A cat, white this time with one blind eye, paws softly into view. She studies you for a moment, then curls up beside your pack, tail tucked over her nose. No fear, no permission asked, just presence. You smile and lean back against a tree. The grass sways, the wind hushes, the stars begin to stretch. She purrs, and so do you. The stars hang soft above you now, scattered like tiny lanterns across a navy quilt. The cat beside you breathes slow and steady, her small body curled into a perfect spiral, the warmth of her fur seeping gently into your side. The meadow is hushed, the trees swaying like sleepy giants, whispering lullabies to the wind. You shift just enough to get comfortable, your back easing into the curve of the tree. The grass around you rustles quietly. No urgency, no alarm. Just the world stretching, exhaling, settling into night. A distant owl calls once, then again, each note more drawn out than the last. Somewhere nearby, a creek murmurs softly. The sound of water smoothing stones with a patience older than kingdoms. You let your eyes drift half shut. The cat purrs again, softer this time, like the ticking of a very old clock. Her ear twitches once, and she nudges closer to your leg, trusting and undisturbed. Whatever the Middle Ages believed, whatever fear once burned through village streets and monastery halls, none of that lives here now. Here, in this quiet place, there are no witches, no trials, no papal letters or pointed fingers, just breath and grass and starlight. Just a tired traveler and a cat who decided to stay. Your thoughts grow slower, softer, lighter, like feathers floating on a breeze. You think of all the cats who outlasted the fear, all the quiet ones who curled beside candles and carried dreams in their fur. You think of the warmth on your cheek,